Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, sponsored by the National Health Association. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and today I'm delighted to have as my guest Andrea Sereda. And Andrea is a kind of an inspirational health and fitness coach in her own right, and her story is just a remarkable story overcoming adversity that I think will be of great interest to our audience. And her story has been chronicled in a number of platforms, including Impact Magazine from Forks Over Knives, the Chicago Tribune, various TV shows. So I'm excited to talk with you. Welcome, Andrea. How are you? Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association, the oldest organization in the world championing the extraordinary benefits of a whole plant food diet and healthy lifestyle, as well as water-only fasting. We believe that health results from healthful living and focus on evidence-based science that promotes the health of you and your loved ones, as well as the health of all animals and the environment. We feature experts from a cross-section of disciplines within the plant nutrition, vegan, psychological, environmental, and animal compassion sectors. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, the NHA's Director of Health Education.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome and kind introduction. I'm doing great. I'm sitting here with you this evening and absolutely honored to be here.
Well, I think one of the things is that you have dealt with the major issue from childhood of dealing with the whole issue of morbid obesity from a very early age and into your, teenage years, adulthood. And then, you made major discoveries. You had your own aha moments that led. So I think the audience would love to hear about that journey, how that began, how you made the transformations you kind of did, what the aha moments were for you that kind of made you take those turns in your own road that led to kind of where you are now. So why don't you share some of that and just let the audience in on that?
Absolutely. So as you said, I struggled with obesity from a very young age. I wasn't always a heavy kid, but when I was 6, somebody made a comment in public about my weight. And from that moment onwards, I was very aware of just how much space I was taking up in the world. And I was raised on a traditional North American diet. And I found that over the years, my weight fluctuated from overweight to obese to overweight to obese. And when I was in university, I actually started feeling very unwell. My throat swelled up. I was gaining weight. My eyes were sort of puffing out. I was losing hair. So I went to the campus physician there and they said, well, you either have thyroid disease or diabetes. We're not sure. Let's run some tests and you'll hear from us, which of course I never did. And I had to be a real advocate for my own health. And it turned out that I had borderline thyroid disease. I was so tired. I was so symptomatic. And so I finally found, actually, funnily enough, a vegan internal medicine doctor, which
Wow.
that was just a coincidence. And she diagnosed me with thyroidism, hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's. Prior to that, though, to try and manage my symptoms, because I wasn't getting any relief or any guidance from the physicians I was seeing, I started researching the healthiest diet. And of course, everything came back a vegan diet, which 20 something years ago, we don't need to do the math, but 20 something years ago, I thought that's too extreme. There's just no way. I could try a vegetarian diet, but being somebody of Dutch descent, the idea of getting rid of dairy altogether, I just couldn't imagine it. So I picked up the book Diet for a New America, and I read that, and that I couldn't unlearn what I had learned. So I became vegetarian pretty much overnight, and got married, and had my weight after my marriage started to climb some more. And the thing is, it's not like I was ever, I never ate a lot of junk food. I've been aware of my weight and trying to lose weight since I was 6. I would try and not eat in front of people and then sneak food in the cupboard. I started exercising in earnest when I was about 9 or 10, found a boxing aerobics video that my mom had, and I would do Leslie Chaitson, I think her name was, and then I heard about Richard Simmons, and so like I've been exercising and trying to lose weight for a very long time. So as my weight was going up, I didn't know what to do about it. So I went through all of the things that many people, especially middle-aged women, try. I went to Weight Watchers about 5 or 6 times. I tried intermittent fasting. I tried a low-carb diet. I tried a very low-fat diet, all vegetarian, but not vegan. And my husband said to me, at one point, maybe we should try cutting out the dairy and wheat, he thought. And so I said, well, dairy, settle down. Let's try the wheat. So we cut out the wheat, and I ate gluten-free for 5 years. And I'll tell you, it didn't really help my weight at all, if I can be honest. And so I got pregnant with my son and then my daughter, and obese through both pregnancies. And when I went to go, I was seeing a breastfeeding specialist because I really struggled with my son. And so when it came to my daughter, I got connected with a breastfeeding specialist right away. She was very forward thinking, and she had found some new research that said women who are struggling to produce milk, if they are insulin resistant, which I likely was given my weight, that if you give them metformin, they may produce more milk. So we tried this, and I still didn't make enough to exclusively breastfeed my daughter, but I was able to at least partially breastfeed her. And so when we were both ready to be done with that, I said to my doctor, okay, I'm ready to come off of the metformin. We're done with breastfeeding. She's old enough now. She's eating solid foods. And he said, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that. We have to protect your pancreas. And I was, well, what are you talking about? And he said, well, Andrea, you're diabetic. Like you've got type 2 diabetes. Your A1C is elevated even on the metformin. If I take you off of that, this is not a happy ending. You have to stay on it. Dr. Sabatino, I was 36 at the time, and I was not okay with being type 2 diabetic. And I also found out that I had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which also not okay with. My mobility was very much impacted. And again, it's not like I was somebody who was always sedentary. I'm trying to think here. 9 years before this, I started teaching a low impact type fitness class. Yes, I was overweight, but I still was a great mover, and I loved moving my body. I always have. I danced growing up and loved music. And so I was somebody who was active. I was teaching these classes. It was called the NIA technique. It's a blend of dance, martial arts, and yoga. And I was teaching this a couple times a week. But by the time that I was trying to get off of the metformin, my weight had climbed to over 300 pounds, because the other thing that the doctor put me on was a medication called domperidone. So it is I was using it as it was an off-label use. It's a GI drug used, and it's a stomach emptying drug. So it was a side effect that they found that people that were taking it started lactating. So they give it to new moms, but it made me hungry all the time. All the time. I was starving. So between those two medications, my weight had climbed to over 300 pounds. I had type 2 diabetes. My mobility was greatly affected. Some days I struggled to even walk around without pain in my joints. And so all of these things sort of happened in a very short period of time. And then I was invited to appear on our local television station to talk about baby sign language. I was a sign language interpreter at the time. I was on maternity leave. I was signing with my babies. So they asked me to come and speak about it. And here was my biggest aha moment, is the moment that I couldn't run away from it. There was no rationalizing it or explaining it away. Kate was on live television, and I was sitting there with with the host, and the cameras went live, and there was a television screen, a monitor that was down right at my feet. Mm-hmm. And the moment that we went live, I literally felt like I was winded because I didn't recognize the person in the monitor. Mm-hmm. And it's not like I didn't know what my size was, because week previous I had gone to the store and I had bought myself a new outfit. I knew what my size was. Looking in the mirror every day, I saw pictures of myself, but I would often say, "Oh, that was just a bad angle. That's couldn't possibly be me. It's the camera. It's the photographer." And in that moment, I couldn't run away from the reality that was sitting right at my feet, which was this is in fact what my weight was. I was in fact diabetic. I was in fact, living with liver disease, and I honestly don't know how I got through that segment because I could not take a breath. Like I was, it
Hmm.
was so difficult to get through. I finished the segment and I got in my car. It was about 20 minutes, half an hour home, and I cried the whole way home. But I figured a lot out, and in that drive, I just figured out that you know I had to do something. The time was going to pass anyways, and this is not the story that I wanted for my life. I realized that I was the only one that could change it. And I have my graduate degree in social work. I was working with clients and focusing on behavior change. Um, which when I tell it, it sounds kind of funny because I was struggling so much myself. But that's when I realized that if I maybe applied some of the principles that I use with my clients to my own behavior, that perhaps I could make some lasting change. I was always very, very hard on myself, but I'm not ever very hard on my clients. I'm supportive. I sometimes challenge them, but I talk to them. I always hold positive regard, and I didn't offer that to myself. And so by the time that I made it home that day, I took a few extra minutes in the driveway before going in because I knew the second I walked in, my family was waiting there, ready to cheer me on, and I wasn't quite ready. I sat in the car and I thought, okay, so what am I going to do? And I had made a couple of decisions. So the first one was that I was going to figure this out no matter how long it took. And as long as I didn't give up, I wasn't failing. That was a big one for me. Because for me before it was always, well, how many inches did I lose? How many pounds did I lose? Did I get all of my workouts in this day? But as long as I woke up every day, I decided and I took one step, even a small step in the right direction, then I was not failing. So I decided that right then and there that I was not going to give myself a time limit. Again, I had always said, okay, I'm going to go to Weight Watchers because we talk a lot about SMART goals.
Mm-hmm.
24 weeks, I am going to lose 30 pounds. And, and I would have these goals that I would set out and these journals. And I had done all the tracking before. I had written it. I had done a lot of the things, but I was never very kind to myself. And I always gave myself a time limit and put a lot of pressure on myself. Then if things didn't work out, I just gave up. I'm like, well, I'm not going to make my goal. But as soon as I removed expectations, I had the freedom to stumble. And in stumbling, I learned and was able to course correct.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do it perfectly the first time. So the other thing is I sat down with my husband after I came in and we celebrated and I said, okay, I think I'm ready to talk to you about this no dairy business because he really felt that it would be a positive thing. And he was very, very supportive. He had gone through periods of veganism, but was a lifelong vegetarian. And he had been vegan more than he had been vegetarian. So we sat down and we watched Forks Over Knives. That was, I had read The Diet for the New America long time before. And then we watched Forks Over Knives together, said, okay, let's do this. And together we went vegan. And I promptly gained 35 pounds because I didn't understand. I didn't understand whole food, plant-based. And so when I would go to a vegan bakery, I'd say, wow, it's vegan.
Yeah.
So I'll try one of each of those flavors of cupcakes. I mean, I didn't go crazy because again, I was lifelong anxious about my weight and everything. Just being very critical of everything that I was eating. So I didn't figure it out the first time around. I thought, okay, what's going on here? Because I had thought veganism, right? People who are vegans, it's like the thinness is almost promised, is what I told myself.
Right.
As long as I eat vegan. And that's not at all what happened. So I watched Forks Over Knives again. And that's where I got the whole no oil part, because I was eating foods that were very high in caloric density.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the piece that I missed. And so the way that I figured that out for myself was I started using a fitness tracker, like my Fitness Pal, just the free version, so that I could better understand the caloric price tag of foods. And in doing so, the mystery of how what I thought was healthy-ish eating, not perfect, but healthier eating vegetarian and then vegan could weigh over 300 pounds. Like, how on earth was I maintaining this weight given the attention that I was paying to every morsel that went in my mouth? And the answer is trail mix, avocados, nuts, nut butters, and the proportions in which I was eating those. So I just started very slowly learning about the caloric value of foods, eating high volume, so high nutrient, low caloric density foods. And it was a process. It was figuring things out as I went, stumbling, like I said, and falling and picking myself back up and trying again. And so my husband at first was not into the no oil. He really felt like we needed the healthy fats, the olive oil, and so forth, and in like a decent quantity. His father was a physician and was always healthy oils, healthy oils, healthy oils. So for the first stretch of time, I cooked my food separately. And so he would make a stir fry and I would do mine water sauteed. Mm-hmm. And after I lost about 90 pounds, he said, okay, because he was also overweight, said, okay, I think that maybe you're onto something here. And so we started eating the same things, preparing the same things together. And he went on to lose 70 pounds and keep it off. So it definitely made it easier when we started doing it together. But I was so determined. Once I figured it out, there was no stopping me. I did have a couple of plateaus. I did definitely. I plateaued at 208 for 3 months. 3 months, it wouldn't budge. It wouldn't move. The scale was just stuck. My food was dialed in. My nutrition was excellent, but my weight was not budging. And so I had to shake things up a little bit. So I started walking. I just walked in the morning before my kids got up. And I made sure I set myself up for success the night before. I even untied the shoelaces of my running shoes because I knew that if there was any barrier, I was just going to climb right back into bed. So I made sure everything was set to go. And I went out every morning, and it took about 3 weeks before the scale moved again. And then all of a sudden, you can see it on my progress chart, down it went. And I maintained my weight loss for 6 years. For 6 years, even through some pretty challenging times. In 2018, my husband had a seizure in the shower and had a traumatic burn injury from scalding water. He had burns to the lower half of his body and his right hand, and spent 17 months in rehab and had to learn how to walk again twice. They thought they were going to have to amputate his feet. And so I was solo parenting and caregiving towards him for all of that time to our 4 kids. And that was a very, very difficult and very stressful time. And on top of the stress, everybody wanted to feed us. And not everybody understands whole food, plant-based diet. They might understand veganism, but when people are suffering, they really want to give you lots of carbohydrates and sugar and high-fat foods. And so the kindness of our community was wonderful, but it was a challenge to not eat all of the delicious energy balls and muffins. They were plant-based, or they were vegan, I should say, but they were not oil-free. And I managed to maintain my weight throughout that period of time. And then in 2021, I had 3 major surgeries in 9 months and got braces. And this was the biggest challenge, not David in the hospital. I managed to get through that, but it was being immobilized for the better part of 2 years and not being able to eat a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables that did me in. So, but this is where I would always tell my clients that this is a journey and there is no destination. You think that there's a destination with weight loss. You think you're going to get to that weight and now you're there, but you're never there because you have to maintain that weight. And that was more challenging for me than losing the weight, because I knew how to lose weight, but I did not know how to maintain weight. And there's not nearly as many supports out there for weight loss maintenance as there are for weight loss. Everybody will tell you how to lose weight, but once you get there, it's a bit of a lonely place to be. And
Yeah.
there's it's somebody who suffers from post-traumatic dieting disorder, as I do. It's very anxiety provoking, the idea of gaining weight back, but also not wanting to get too thin because people start making comments that, oh, are you okay? Like, you're going to just disappear. You're becoming a wisp of
Right.
a thing.
Right. Let me
And people,
touch on that, but let me take this little break and hear from our sponsor just for a second, because I want to get into some things you already mentioned. I want to kind of get behind the veil of the weight into the issues that center around the shame and the guilt and the other things that you carried with you through all of those times. And we'll talk about behavior just a little bit. We're going to take a short break. I'm here with Andrea Sereda, and we're having an incredible conversation. We're going to take just a very short break and hear from our sponsor, the National Health Association, and we'll be right back. You're listening to the NHA Health Science Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. Are you ready to revolutionize your health? Then you're ready for the 2024 National Health Association Conference taking place in June of 2024. Join us for inspiring talks by experts like Drs. Dean and Aisha Shirzai, Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Ron Weiss, and Dr. Lori Marbus, in addition to Drs. Goldhammer, Dr. Esser, Dr. Fitzgerald, and yours truly, Dr. Frank Sabatino, along with leading SOS-free chefs Kathy Fisher, Brittany Giroudi, and Dylan Holmes. Register now at healthscience.org/NHA conference and enjoy early bird savings until December 31st of 2023. This conference will transform your health journey. Secure your spot today. And remember, your feedback matters. Please take a moment to leave a rating and a review wherever you're listening to the NHA Health Science Podcast. Also, be sure to visit the NHA website at healthscience.org. That's healthscience.org to get lots of great recipes, articles, newsletter archives, and become a member of the NHA. I'm Dr. Frank Sabatino, your host, and now back to the show. Welcome back to the Health Science Podcast. I'm here with my guest, Andrea Sereda. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. I want to go back to that point where you had that startling moment when you were on that show and you caught a glimpse of yourself in the monitor and you didn't recognize kind of who you are. And I want to go before that because it always comes up. It often comes up when someone will say, well, someone got to 300 plus pounds. How could they possibly do that? What is the disconnect in the visualization of your own body image or in the denial of what is actually going on in your life? I'd love for you to speak to that because that is something that is tied into, compulsive eating, food addiction, and the like. And you had some underlying pathological conditions with low thyroid, pancreatic stuff, insulin resistance, but those things are often fed by some of the very choices. And you made the point that as you work with clients and their choices, I'd love to get into how you recognize now and how you have dealt with what was previously basically a denial of what was actually happening. And that's really a hallmark of the addictive process. I'd love for you to kind of talk on that. How was it that as you looked in mirrors, as you looked at yourself, as you dealt with body image, that it took that little look in that monitor to be the trigger to make change? Because you had been looking at yourself in the monitor of your own mirrors and in the monitors for a very long time. So what was the difference in that view than the view that you had of yourself prior to that time?
Well, and I think for me, a big part of it in terms of like, how can we get here? How could I get there after, it's not as if I gained the weight overnight. It's not as if I woke up that morning and all of a sudden there it was. It had creeped up over time, but my weight sort of went up and down, up and down. And I always felt like my self-view was about 6 months to a year behind what I actually looked like. So for example, even when I lost weight, I still saw myself as being heavier And vice versa. When I gained weight, I still saw myself as being lighter. And so there was this disconnect in the way that I actually looked,
Right.
and what I was seeing. And part of it, I was able to explain it to myself because of all of the messages that we get in popular media, right? So my weight would go up on the scale, but I was an active person. So they would say, oh, it's just muscle. Muscle weighs more than fat. That's what it is. You know what? Yes, muscle does weigh more than fat. If we take 5 pounds of muscle and 5 pounds of fat, they look very different. But when a person is exercising, we would expect that they would be losing fat at the same time that they would be gaining muscle. And we would be seeing changes in how our clothing fit. And we would, but I was just hear that one bit. Oh, that's what it must be. It must be muscle. I grew up being told I was always a big girl. I'm from a Dutch family. I'm 5'9". My grandmother was 6 feet tall. Big boned. You're a big girl is what I was told. It turns out that that's actually not true. That's not at all true. Right. And so I think, and I think that there was this sort of cacophony of messages that were floating around in my head. And there was a disconnect because I did not trust myself. I didn't trust myself to know when I was full. That communication pathway was broken in me. I was eating for reasons other than food, other than fuel. And I was made to believe that there was something wrong with me for doing that. I have since learned that everybody eats for reasons other than fuel. We eat to celebrate, we eat to connect. And just because I do that one night going out with my husband on a date doesn't mean that there's something inherently wrong with me or that I'm broken. If I'm normal, and if I can see it that way, then the next day I can wake up and have my oatmeal with tons of fruit, just like I do every day, instead of grabbing something that is less healthy because I feel like I've blown it, so to speak. So
your connection with your own, obviously your own forgiveness has absolutely improved, obviously, because you realize that if you do this or you go on what someone would call off track, what we find is truly successful people all go off track. The really successful people get back on track in some reasonable period of time without whipping themselves and going to hell in a handbasket. So in a way, you've kind of made that kind of move psychologically in your life. Do you feel that you have solved that issue of body dysmorphia? Do you actually think you see yourself as you are now more clearly than you ever have? Because before you were doing that dance of seeing there's still that obese person. I mean, this goes back to childhood. So these images are ingrained over a very long period of time. That's a lot of work on a psychological level to dissolve and forgive and deal with that shame and deal with that guilt and deal with that forgiveness. Do you feel like you really have made big strides on that journey of doing that? And do you now how do you see yourself now?
So I think I've made huge strides in that area, but it was a lot of work. And when people say, oh my goodness, you lost so much weight, how did you do it? The quick answer, of course, is diet and exercise, but that is one fraction. Like it is such a small piece. It is consistency. It is giving myself grace. It is forgiving myself. It is completely shifting my perspective. So I heard somebody say this, and I don't know where along my journey I heard it, but it resonated with me. It said, if you're driving down the road and you get a flat tire, typically we just change the tire and keep on going. We don't puncture the other 3 tires.
Right.
And I thought, absolutely. So if I get off track, I don't need to puncture the other 3 tires. I can get right back on track as soon as possible. And so it was these types of things that I was learning, but it really was reprogramming how I saw myself, how I see myself now. I see myself as about 35 pounds from where I would like to be as a result of my 3 surgeries. This is where the journey never ends. And so I do see myself as not being exactly where I feel my best, my best weight, which is the healthiest weight that I can achieve. the lowest weight, my best weight is the lowest weight that I can achieve living the healthiest lifestyle I can enjoy, not
Right.
just tolerate, but enjoy. So for me, I'm about 30 pounds away from my best weight, where I feel really good. I feel like I can enjoy going to the odd plant-based restaurant with my husband but still feel good in my body. So I think that I'm clearer now than I've ever been. There might be a bit of a lag, but it's not 6 months to a year anymore. It's
Right.
a lot
Well,
closer.
it's a big issue. You know, I've dealt with people with weight issues for 40 years plus in practice, and
Mhm.
it's unfortunate when so much of our emotional and psychological well-being becomes locked in and dictated by numbers on the scale. And that's what happens to a lot of people with a lot of these weight loss programs. So, you know, if they don't have that pound that they lost that week, it's almost like the entire world falls apart. When you're making a very real point, we are not the weight that we are as a totality. We are so much more than the numbers on the scale. And when you start to embrace that with joy and really live a life and understand that, yes, it's good to have goals. We want to have goals. We want to achieve certain things in health and maybe in our physical appearance. But it's so important to not let those numbers dictate our entire emotional well-being. And it does to a lot of people. So, you
Mhm.
know, I'm glad we're talking about that, because I think a lot of people that look at problems of weight, and we know it's a pandemic of obesity out there, so there's so many people with weight issues, that it gets too easy to get lost in just focusing on scale numbers and
Mhm.
not deal with all of those issues that are behind that. What are we using food for? You know, what does it satisfy in our lives? And are there other ways that we can create
Mhm.
that pleasure and joy to really not only survive, but to create this inspired, joyful life? And I
Yes.
think, you know, you've got to transcend just the numbers on the scale, because when you do that, actually weight loss gets easier. It
It does.
actually happens more effectively when you do that. So let's touch on something, because you made the point that, you know, in your own life and with the people you counsel, you talk about this idea. It's not just about weight loss, it's about sustainability. How do we create
Mhm.
sustainable weight loss? So talk
Mhm.
a little bit to me in terms of your counseling and how you work with the people you do, how you impress that idea of sustainability. What are the things you share with your people to make them more sustainably successful, not just immediately successful?
Mhm. So I believe a big part of my success, and I share this with my clients, is that I made a very conscious choice to never do anything that I didn't think I could do for the rest of my life.
Okay.
And so because we can white knuckle through anything for 2
Mhm.
weeks. We don't, people would ask me, well, do you give diet plans? Do you give like food plans? I said, no, because so what's going to happen? You're going to follow it for a couple of weeks and then you're going to go back to eating what it is that you like to eat. So instead, let's take a look at what your life looks like. What realistically, how I would counsel somebody who worked full time on the road and had to eat out with clients a lot is going to be very
Right.
different than stay at home mom versus somebody who's retired. And so, do you like to cook? Don't you like to cook? And I always follow the good, better, best model. So, best is great, but good is still good, and better is just that much better. But we don't always have to be best. We don't always have to be perfect. We need to be consistent. So when I was walking, I only walked for 35 minutes a day because I could see myself doing that when I'm 92. I can't
Mhm.
see myself going to the gym 3 times, or 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I'm not going to do it for 6 months and get all the weight off and then just go back to what I'm doing. And this is what I would share with them. So what can you do? What do you feel you can do for the rest of your life? You know, can you walk? Can you ride a bike? Can you measure and weigh your portions? If no, then let's not start doing that now. Right. And so sometimes I would challenge them to try something. What if we try it? And let's see how it fits for you.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they are experts in their own life. I can be the navigator, but they are the ones driving this path. And so we would try different things. And I would always say, look, I've got a million ideas. So let's start with this. And I want you to tell me if this is not going to work. Tell me right away. We might give it a try for a week or two, but if after that you're like, nope, I'm not going to be able to keep this up, then we're going to scrap it and try something else. So an example, I had a client, she walked in. So I started a program in collaboration with a physician's practice because I wanted to help other people that were struggling the way that I was struggling. And
Right.
I knew what could be gained by making these changes. My life was completely and is completely different than it used to be in so many different ways. So I really was inspired to help other people. So I chatted with my, at the time, family physician. He was opening up a new practice. And I had this one client at that practice, and she sat down and she said, I don't cook. I don't do kitchens. I eat out all my meals. And I thought, oh my God, I don't think I'm going to help this person because restaurant meals are so high. And for her, there were high stakes. She needed to have surgery, but they were not going to give her this surgery until she was a certain weight because of the risk involved with anesthetic. And so she was motivated, but she was pretty stubborn. And I worked with her, and it was step by step. So it was, okay, well, what if you took that restaurant meal and you only had half of it, and we put a big salad on it? You can buy a bag of salad, right? It's already cut up for you. If you don't chop and you don't cook, we'll take that and let's, so try to make it as simple, try to make it fit for her life. And over time, I remember she came in about 5 months in, she said, Coach, I made something. And she showed me her camera. She had taken a photo of this meal that she had made. She said, I even turned on the oven. So she was, over time, but it was baby steps. I had to meet her where she was when she walked into that office. Right. If I had said to her, that's it, only organic, you're going to, all fresh, all organic, I would have lost her. And she had the surgery, and she was incredibly successful. And she's now living her best life out on the coast. So, that was a huge success. But that was somebody who I thought, I cannot help this person and it's not going to be sustainable. And here she is 7 years later, still doing great. So, I really feel like a big part of it is finding out who the person in front of me is and what's going to work for them. I absolutely, I loved Dr. Neil Bernard's book on reversing diabetes. And I think that might even be where I got the good, better, best piece from. He says, is organic fresh veggies, are they great? Yes, they're good. But a can of corn is still better than a side of fries. And Absolutely. So, right? And so if all that they have access to is a can of corn, then eat the corn, eat the frozen peas. Is it kale? No, but it's still way better than, than something that is higher in calories and lower in nutrients. So just really encouraging people to make choices and so try things on, but be really, really real with me and with yourself as to what is sustainable. Because what I don't want to get into is weight cycling. Dropping weight, gaining it back, dropping weight, gaining it back.
Yeah, that cycle is a devastation too. And it creates such a failure mentality because there's a deprivation and failure mentality that takes over. So that is a negative thing. And you're right. You want to have this kind of steady moving forward as best you can and with some kind of sustainability. So do you see people in person or online or both? How do you deal with people?
So online now. And
let's talk about that. How does somebody find you? What's the place online that they would go to learn more about you?
So they can reach out to me through my website, which is andreasereda.com. And I'm happy to chat with anyone. I also have a women's only page that on Facebook, which is The Journey with Andrea Sereda. That's what it is. The Journey by Andrea Sereda. And so lots of free support on there. And I also have lots of videos up on YouTube that they can check out. And then in person, I teach fitness classes. I try and pass on my joy of movement to other people. I've always liked moving, but I've not always liked exercising. And what I really strive to do is modify movement so that everybody feels successful. Everybody walks out of my class with a smile on their face, feeling proud that they did it, but also maybe they had some fun and we laugh a lot. We don't take ourselves too seriously. And I have people from, I've had kids, but I typically teach 30s and all the way up 80s, 90s. And we just have a great time. I have a couple of dance parties 3 times a week, Zumba classes, and teach strength training, and just try and really get people moving, not to burn calories. That's another huge shift, not to burn calories, but to feel good in their bodies, feel like they can be successful, get out of that failure mentality, because it really can start with one small step. If they feel like hey, look what I just did. Maybe I can change how I'm eating. Maybe I can try and drink more water, get better sleeps, one little step at a time. So I also teach those things in person.
I noticed on your bio too that you had a special interest in creating wellness and health support for the Canadian Armed Forces. Tell me a little bit about how that evolved for you and why that's important to you.
Yeah, so I work. So my full time day job, so to speak, is my full time job period is health, but during the day, during the week, I am in health leadership through a program that provides rehabilitation services for veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces. I started out as a rehab specialist in that area, working with, and what I love about our program, this is a new program here. And what I love about it is that we look at the whole person. So we connect them with nutritional support. We connect them with kinesiologists. We connect them with physiatrists. We connect them with whoever it is that they need to live a fulsome life after service. And when I first started my work, I thought I'm going to be seeing, people who are near retirement, 50s or 60s. You know what? Youngest is like 23-year-old veteran, all the way through until I think the oldest veteran we've had referred to the program is in their 80s. Mm-hmm. And because of my background, my area of expertise is more in the mental health side of things, but I manage an interdisciplinary team of occupational therapists, physiotherapists, chiropractors, kinesiologists, and registered nurses, and psychotherapists. And together we support these veterans to live their best possible life. And previously, this program was all about getting people back to work, but now in this newly envisioned program, some of our goals are to get people out hiking again, or get people, one gentleman said, I just want to be able to play hockey with my son. And so it's more than just about getting people back to work, though that is an element of our program, but it really is about just helping these retired military live their best possible life. So I love it. I love it.
That's beautiful. So how does Andrea take care of herself? Tell me what you do on a daily basis to really reinforce your sense of well-being and your joy and your passion.
So a big part of it for me is my Zumba classes. I love them. So I've got a little Zumba community here in Nova Scotia, and I still have a fairly active one back in Alberta. So that's where I lived before in Western Canada. And so I teach 3 times a week, once a week online, so that people from anywhere can join me. And so I do that, and that brings me a lot of joy, because in order to do that, I have to listen to music and I practice. So I dance in my kitchen, and I just love it. My husband and I also do a lot of cooking together, and we love going to farmers markets. He's an excellent baker, which is both a blessing and a curse. This man makes the most delicious plant-based breads and whatnot. So I have to be very careful.
Well, you better keep him for sure.
I know. Yes. He's doing pretty well. I anticipate I'll keep him around for a while yet. And then also I like to get out for walks. I walk frequently, and that's it. I think that's about it. I love to learn as well. So I'm always taking new courses and things like that. That's the other way I take care of myself.
That's beautiful. So Andrea, as we wind this down, do you have any final words you'd like to share with our audience out here? Anything that we haven't talked about, or anything additional you'd like to share with them?
I think that, what I would like to leave them with is just not to give up. If you are struggling and you haven't figured it out, one of my favorite words is the word yet. And so I like to tack that on. I don't like exercise yet. Maybe you haven't found the right class, or you haven't found the right teacher. That's the other thing, right? Oh, I can't figure out this plant-based eating. I still crave cheese. Well, you haven't figured it out yet. But give yourself time. Try new recipes. Try new things. And as long as you don't give up, you're not failing, you're succeeding, and you're just taking that one step closer to a completely different life. I cannot articulate the difference in how I feel now compared to how I felt in 2015, the day that I went on that, just before that television show.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even, when I say I don't recognize her, it's for so many reasons other than the weight. The weight is honestly the least of it, if I can be honest.
Well, I want to really thank my special guest, Andrea Sereda, today. It was such a pleasure spending time with you. I really thank you for sharing your story, your heart, your inspiration. And I urge our audience to follow Andrea. You can see the website scrolling across the screen in our show notes. And I really want to thank those of you that have joined us today, because without you, we can't do what we do. And I want to really thank you for being part of this very active and healthy community. And on behalf of the National Health Association, I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and I look forward to being with you on the next episode of the Health Science Podcast. Thank you so much, Andrea. Again, really, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to evidence-based health science that backs a whole food, plant-exclusive lifestyle and contributes to the well-being of all people, animals, and our environment. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. Be sure to leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next show.